In this crash course, you will learn how to create a full application from scratch with Flutter for both Android and iOS with only one code base. So the application that we'll be creating is a simple quiz app, so let's take a look at it. We got a simple landing page. Whenever we tap that page, we go to the actual quiz, which has some random statements for us, like Flutter is awesome, true or false. Well, of course, Flutter is awesome, so let's say true. We check whether the answer is correct, and then we throw a fancy animation to the user to show whether their answer was actually correct or not, right? And then we have a lot of other statements that go on and go on for as long that you have questions to ask the user. Now, before we start actually creating this project, you should know that there's a few prerequisites. First of all, you will have to have Flutter installed already, which is actually a pretty easy process. So just go to the Flutter website and follow the steps. Of course, if there is any problems with the installation, feel free to ask me for help down in the comments below and I'll be sure to help you. Also, you should know the basic concepts of object-oriented programming because Flutter uses a language called Dart, which is object-oriented. So if you have any experience with Java, C#, or even like JavaScript using TypeScript or ES6, you'll be good to go. So just make sure that you get the basic concepts of classes. So without further ado, let's now just start and create our first Flutter project. Creating a Flutter project is rather easy. Just go to your command prompt on Windows or your terminal on both Linux and Mac and cd into the directory you would like your Flutter project to be in. So I want my project to be on my desktop. So cd desktop. To actually create the Flutter project, type Flutter space create space the name of your project. So I will call my project quiz, but of course feel free to rename it to whatever you'd like. So this will run the creation process. It should only take a minute, so I'll come back to you guys in a second. Alright, so once that is done, you have your Flutter project created. Now you can open it in any text editor you would like. I'm using Visual Studio Code, but of course feel free to use IntelliJ, Android Studio, Atom, whatever you'd like. Just open it up and we'll go further from there. So in Visual Studio Code, I will open my project, open my folder. It is called quiz. Select folder, and now your code, your pre-built code for you should open up. For this video, I will use the built-in terminal in Visual Studio Code to type my commands. So instead of using the command prompt, I will be using the terminal in Visual Studio Code. So just remember, whenever I type something in Visual Studio Code in the terminal, so in here, just remember that you can also type it here in your command prompts on Windows or in your terminal in Mac or Linux. So let's now actually start coding. So in your code editor, go to your library folder and open main.dart. In here you will find a lot of code already. So let's delete all of this because we want to start from scratch. So once you've deleted everything, import a new package called material. And this file will actually include a lot of widgets for us, which implement the material design spec. So a widget is basically some sort of visual for us to use. And in this package, there is a lot of pre-built widgets for us to use. So also in your main.dart file, create a new method called main. This is basically the starting point for your application, so be sure to never forget this. In here, type run app, and run app takes a widget. We will give it a material app widget. And a material app widget is basically a widget which gives us a lot of functionality in terms of it allows us to give our application a custom theme. It allows us for named navigation. And if all of that doesn't make sense for you right now, don't worry too much about it. It will, become clearer in a second. But for now, you just need to know that the material app widget has a property called home, which will be our home page for the application. So let's now create the actual homepage. So to create our homepage, let's first create a new folder in our library folder called pages. In here, let's create a new file and let's call this file landing_page.dart. And this file will basically contain all of our code for our homepage or landing page, whatever you want to call it. So in here, let's import our material package and let's create a class to represent that actual page. And I'm going to call it landing page. So we need to extend this class with the stateless widget class. And I should explain to you what a stateless widget actually is because it's very important in Dart. in Flutter. So a stateless widget, let's explain what a stateless widget is now because it's way easier. So imagine that you have an application that shows the time, and every time a minute goes by, you want to update the visuals, of course, right? Because you want to keep your application up to date, you want to notify the user something changed, the time changed. So in that application, we will call the numbers or the time on the screen the state. And every time we update the state, we update the time, we want to re-render, rebuild the visuals. With a stateless widget, we do not have a state, so we do not have something to update. So we basically are left with a static widget. So that's when you use a stateless widget. So in here, we should override the build method, which looks like this, and get used to writing this kind of layout for classes in Flutter because it's used a lot. And in here we create our visuals, right? So we return a new widget, and let's create a material. So a material is a widget, and like what does it look like, right? What is the visual look of a material? So a material is basically just a piece of paper, and that piece of paper can have a color, for example. So we could give it a color, something like colors.green accent, and that will color our piece of paper green. Now we can also give it a child and a lot of other fancy stuff, but for now, let's just keep it like this. So let's review this one more time. We have a material widget. Material widget acts like a piece of paper, and we have given that piece of paper a green color. So if we would run our application now, we would expect a blank page that is green, right? So let's save this file. Let's go to our main.dart file. Let's import our new page. So import pages landing page, and in the home property, let's change this to new landing page. Awesome. Now we are actually ready to run our application on an emulator. So of course I'm using Windows, so I'm using an Android emulator. But if you're a Mac, feel free to use the iOS simulator or a real device, of course. So to run our application, we use Flutter run. We type this in our terminal or command prompt. We press enter, and this can take a while for the first time. So I'll be back to you guys in a minute. Alright, so as expected, we have a green piece of paper or a green screen on our device right now. So nothing too fancy, nothing too exciting. So let's dive back into the code and spice things up a little bit. So let's go back to our landing page.dart file. And as I told you guys, the material widget also has a child property. And this child property takes a widget. So the widget that we will use here is called Inkwell. And an inkwell is basically a fancy invisible button with an even fancier animation. And if that doesn't make sense to you right now, don't worry too much about it. It will become clearer in just a minute. Just know that the inkwell has a property called child as well. And this child takes a widget. So the widget that we will use here is a column. And I hope that you guys are seeing a pattern of like nesting widgets into widgets. So a lot of widgets have a child property, which you can nest new widgets in, right? But the column is a little bit different because, as you can imagine, a column takes multiple widgets and displays them underneath each other, right? So instead of just having a child property, the column has a property called children. And like you can see, it takes an array or a list of widgets, right? And here we can basically just start typing, creating new widgets as we did here and here. So the first widget that we want to display in our column is called a new text, or it's called a text. And a text widget takes a string, and this string will be displayed as a text widget on the screen, right? So let's create the string, let's quiz. Awesome. Let's also create another text widget underneath here, separated by a comma, of course, because we are working in an array, in a list. So another text widget, and let's call this tab to start. Exclamation point. Now to restart your application or to rebuild your application, there's two options in your terminal or command prompts that you were working in. You can press uppercase R or lowercase r. Uppercase R will fully restart your application, fully reload your application and throw away the state. And lowercase r will preserve the state for you. We don't have a state right now, so it doesn't matter for us. So let's just press lowercase r. And once that is done, we will see, hopefully, oh, first of all, we need to save the file, of course, right? So save the file, press lowercase r. Let's go back to our emulator. And now we actually see some text on the page. Awesome. Now it's displayed at the top, not where we want it to be, because of course we want it to be centered. So let's do that really quick. So the column widget also takes another property called main axis alignment. And main axis alignment, we can assign a main axis alignment property to that. And we want to center it right. So the main axis for a column is the up and down axis, right? The y-axis. And we want to center it on the y-axis. So that's what we're doing here. Save this, refresh or reload our application. And now it's centered. Awesome. So we still need to do a few things to finish this page off, of course. First of all, the text looks a little bit dull. It doesn't look as good as in the preview application, right? So to change that, we can go to our text widgets over here. And the widget section, the text widget also has a property called style, in which we can define our styles for that text, right? So the style widget, the style property takes a text style class object, and in here the text style object has a lot of properties, right? For example, color, we could give it colors.white. We could say font size, and let's give this a font size of 50.0 because it takes a double, so an integer wouldn't work. Can we do something else with this? Let's make this bold, so font weight dot bold, and I think that that's it for this text widget. So let's save this file, let's reload our application, and that looks way better, right? So let's do the same for our second text widget. Style, new text style, color. Let's also give it a white color because that looks kind of nice. Color is the white. Let's give it a bigger font size, something like, what did I use in my preview application? 20.0. And let's, did I make it italic or bold? I also made it bold in the preview application. So let's say font weight dot bold. Right, now let's refresh this, and that should look a lot better right now, right? Awesome. So there's still one like mysterious thing about this page, and that is the inkwell widget, right? Because I told you guys that it is an invisible button that register clicks or taps, but whenever I tap something, nothing happens, and we don't seem to register the tap, right? So to actually register a tap, the inkwell has another property called onTap, and its onTap property takes a function. Let's create an arrow function, and so whenever we tap this, we want to print something out. For example, we want to print we tapped the page, exclamation point. Let's save this. Let's reload our application. And now you will see what I meant by the fancy animation, right? So click the page. And now we see that fancy material animation that we all love, or some of you hate maybe, but you know, it is what it is. And you can see over here that every time we tap the page, we print out, we tapped the page. Awesome. So that's basically it for this landing page, for this home page. We will come back to it later when we actually navigate to another page. But for now, it's done, it's finished. So congratulations, you just created your first page in Flutter. Alright, so let's now take a step back from the visuals and let's create some classes for us to use later on in the project. So first of all, we would need a question class for us to hold questions, right? So let's create a new folder in the library folder, and let's call this utils. In the utils folder, let's create a new file called question.dart, and this file will hold a class for the question. So let's create a new question class. And we will need some class variables. For example, we need a string to hold the question. And we will need a boolean to hold the answer, right? Now, traditionally with object-oriented programming languages, you would now create a constructor with some arguments. So for example, we need a string question. And we also need a boolean for the answer. And in the constructor's body, so in here, you would then assign the class variables, or the arguments to class variables, right? Now, like you can see, this is a lot of work. It's a lot of typing work, and especially when you have more class variables, this could be tedious work. So Dart actually has a shorter syntax for this. So instead of using this body, we could replace this with a semicolon, and in here we can simply do this .question and this .answer. Now this .question refers to this to the class variable question, and this .answer refers to the class variable answer. So what we're saying is we want a question as the argument, which is a string, and we want an answer as an argument, which is going to be a boolean. And we're using this dot syntax here because whenever a new instance of this object is created, we want the arguments to be assigned instantly to the class variables, right? So that's just a neat little way to type that out without a lot of code. Now also I would like to create, I would also like to make these class variables final, because whenever we create a new question, we would not want to change it up. So let's just make this final and let's save this. Let's now create a new file for quiz class. So let's create a new file in the utils folder, call it quiz.dart, and in here let's create a new class called quiz. We will need a few class variables. One is going to be a list of questions. Let's call this questions. One is going to be an integer to keep track of where we are in the questions, right? So at what question we are at. So let's call this current question index, and let's assign this to -1 to begin with. And let's also keep track of the score. So let's create a new variable, class variable called score, and let's assign this to 0. Now, like you can see over here, the question class isn't recognized in this file because we still need to import it. So let's do that. Import question.dart, and let's now use our new way of writing fancy constructors in this file. So quiz this dot questions. So remember, this will just automatically assign this argument to the questions class variable. And in the body of the constructor, let's actually also do questions dot shuffle, because we want to randomize the questions every single time that we create a new quiz, right? So also something that I would like to do is create these variables private, these class variables private, right? Because we don't want the user to actually change the questions or to change the current question index or score. So to make something private, we do not have something like a private keyword in Dart. We actually simply place an underscore in front of the variable name, right? So let's do that for these variables. And also in here in the constructor, we also have to change this, of course. So let's now create some getters for these class variables, because of course we made them private so the user cannot access them, cannot read them, and that's kind of an issue right now. So Dart has a cool syntax to create getters. So let's try to create a getter for the score. So int get, which is a keyword to notify Dart that we are creating a getter, score, and we'll return the score. So this is the syntax to create getters in Dart. And the cool thing about this is, if I create a new instance of the quiz object, then I could do quiz dot. If I now take a look at the score, then we see that it looks like a normal class variable, it looks like a normal variable, but actually in the class we're using a getter function, right? So as far as the user is concerned, score is just a class variable. All right, so let's now create getters for our other class variables as well. So list questions, and let's return the questions. Of course, don't forget the get keyword. Now, it's probably not useful for us to return the current question index. Something that would be useful for the user to know is the length, so how many questions are in this quiz, right? So int get length, and here we just return the questions dot length, so the length of the list, right? Something else that's useful for us is probably the question number. So what question are we at? Are we at question 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, right? So let's create an integer for that, a getter integer for that. So int get question number, question. And let's think about this. So current question index is an index for a list, and a list starts counting from 0, right? So 0, 1, 2, 3. So we have question 0, question 1. Now humans start counting from 1, of course. So what we're going to do is current question index plus 1. That's what we're going to return. Awesome. Now we need one more getter to return the current question or the next question. So we do question get next question, and this will look a little bit weird. So instead of using this arrow function, we will now just create a regular function with this getter, with this get keyword. So in here we first of all add 1 to the current question index, excuse me, because we want to go to the next question, we want to up the index 1 to get to the next question in the list. If the current question index is larger or equal to the length, then we know, okay, there's no questions left, so let's return null. Else, let's just return questions, current question index, right? Now, one more thing that we need to do is we need to have a function to answer whenever a user answers a question, we need a function for that, right? So let's create a function called answer, which takes an argument, a boolean, and let's call this is correct. So if is correct, then we up the score by 1. Awesome, and that's basically going to be it for our quiz class. All right, so after writing some classes, after writing some boring stuff, let's now go on with the Flutter stuff, the exciting stuff. So let's create a new page, a page for the quiz. So in pages, create a new file, and let's call this quiz page underscore darts. And this will contain a code. This file will contain a code for our quiz page. First of all, let's import the material package here, and we also need to import the class that we just created, which are the question class and also the quiz class, right? So let's do that real quick. Quiz. Now. The page that we're creating right now, the quiz page, will actually not be a stateless widget like the landing page, but will actually be a stateful widget. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So class quiz page extends stateful widgets, and now a stateful widget needs to be connected with a state, right? So let's call this quiz page state extends state quiz page. So let's take a look at what we're actually doing here and go further with building the layout after that. So a stateful widget, like I told you guys in the beginning, is a widget that can be rebuilt. So visuals can change over time. So that comes in handy for animations, for whenever you want to, give some feedback to the user. So just think about the hypothetical timer application or time application that I told you guys about at the beginning of this tutorial. You could definitely make that with stateful widgets. But the thing is, I'm constantly telling you guys that stateful widgets are mutable, right? That they can change, but that's actually not the complete truth, because a stateful widget, the class itself, is actually immutable. So no variables, no class variables in this class change, but we connect a state with it. So we connect a state with the stateful widget, and this state is mutable. We can change variables, class variables in this state, and that is what allows us to rebuild our visuals, right? So I think that was a pretty clear explanation. If not, feel free to ask me for more for clarification in the comments below. So let's take a look at what we have to write here in the body of the stateful widget. So we need to override a method, and this method is called createState, which returns a state. And let's in here just return a new quiz page state. And with this, we are connecting our quiz page state with this quiz page, right? And that's basically everything we need to do here in the stateful widget. The quiz page state looks a little bit like it looks a lot like a stateless widget, as we've seen in the landing page, in the sense that it also we also need to override something in here called the build method, build context, and in here we also start creating the visuals. We also start creating the layout in here, right? We return a widget, and that's what we do in the state class. So let's now actually create some visuals for our page. So in the build method, let's return a new widget. The widget that we'll be using is called a stack. Now a stack looks a lot like a column in the sense that it also has a children property, but instead of layering the children underneath each other, just as with a column, a stack stacks them on top of each other. So a stack layers the children on top of each other. Now the reason why this is useful for us is because we want to have an overlaying this stacking over the page when the user answers a question, right? So that's why we use a stack here. We won't be using it for now, but just remember, a stack stacks children or widgets on top of each other. So in the children list, let's create a new column, and this column is basically going to act as our page. So this column is going to contain our through button, our container for our question, and our false button. So let's create a comment here and say this is our main page. In here we need to use the children property, and in here we create a new material. This material will have a color, and this material will act as our through button. So let's create a comment here, through button, and the color for this through button is going to be green, right? Green accent. This material is also going to have a child. This child is going to be that magical button, the inkwell, because we want to be able to press on the button, of course. So it's going to have an on-tap property. And for now, let's just print out something whenever the user taps on the button. So let's print out you answered true. The ink well is going to have a child. This child is going to be a new center. And a center is exactly what you would expect it to be. It centers the child. So the center has a child. This child is going to be a new container. The reason why we use a container will become clear in a second. A container also has a child, and that child is going to be the text for our actual button. So it's going to be true. So let's now actually save this, and let's go to our main.dart file. Let's import our quiz page, pages, quiz page, and let's change our home to a new quiz page. And let's then restart our application. So let's take a look at it. So I know what you're thinking. This is pretty underwhelming. We just got a green bar with some text in there, and the height is just high enough to display our text, right? So normally in Flutter, the widgets try to take up as much space as possible, but whenever we have a widget that is a child of a column, then the widget will try to take up as little space as possible. Now to change this, we should actually wrap our material, so our material that is a child of our column, in an expanded widget. So let's cut this. Let's create a new expanded. An expanded has a child. And in here, let's just paste what we just copied, right? Let's try to indent this a little bit nicer. And now if I save this, refresh our application, then the full page should be covered in our material. So we now have our button, our true button. Whenever I tap it, you can see that the fancy animation appears. And we also have our print statement printing you answered through here. Now we should also create our false button, right? So what we could do is just copy all of this and paste it at the end of our list of children. Let's make this color red accent. You answered false, and the text is going to be false. And actually, because we created this expanded widget, let's get this comment up here. Whoops. True button, and let's delete this. False button, right? So if we now refresh this, then we should see our green button and our red button both working with the nice animation. But this looks a little bit messy, right? This looks like we should not have all of this code just to display these two things, right? Because they are very similar. The only difference between these two buttons is this text and is the color. So let's now try to create a separate widget that we can call whatever we'd like to actually only have the code once instead of having this code here twice. So let's now actually create a new folder in our library folder, which will hold all of our UI elements. So let's call this folder UI, and in here let's create a new file, and let's call this file answer_button.dart. And this file will basically contain all of the code for our answer buttons, whether it is the true or false answer button. So in here, let's import the material package. And our answer button is going to be a stateless widget. So answer button extends stateless widget. And in here, let's just override our build method as usual. Widgets build context. Whoops, context. All right, so in here we can, as usual, just start creating some visuals. So what we can do is we can go back to our quiz page and take one of these buttons, copy it, and just paste it in here, right? Let's try to indent this a little better. Let's get a return in front of this. Okay, so what I did is I just copied all of this. So for this one, but I copied all of the code for one button. and I paste it in there. I pasted it in the build methods. So if I now save this and import our answer button, so import .ui, and it's called answer button, then I can now replace all of this code with a new widget that we created called new answer button. Let's now save this, refresh, and that should give us the exact same application. Alright, so let's now try to make our answer button a little bit more modular, because at the moment we can only display our green true button, but of course we would also like to be able to display our false button with it. So let's go to our answer button.dart file. And first of all, we'll need a new variable. Let's call this variable answer, and let's make our constructor here. Whoops. So answer button this.answer, and the answer is basically just going to tell our answer button whether the green, so the true button, or whether the false button, the red button, has been pushed. So now in color, we can use this answer button to decide whether we want a green or a red button. So in here, let's use the ternary operator. So answer equals true, question mark. So if the answer is true, then we want to make this button green, so green accent, and else we want to make the color of this button red, so colors.red accents. So if you're unfamiliar with this notation, this is called the ternary operator, and it's basically the same as doing this. So if answer equals true, then return colors.green accents. Else, so if the answer is not true, then we do return colors.red accent. Right, so this is the same as doing this. Alright, so let's delete this, and let's now do the exact same in our text. So if the answer equals true, then we want to display a string with the text true in it, else we want to display false. So let's save this, and let's now reload our application. Whoops, and of course we are getting an error here, so let's take a look at this. And the reason for that is, of course, that that we are now trying to create an answer button here, but we are not passing in enough arguments, because now we have to pass an answer argument. So in here, this is our true button. So in here we pass in true, and let's now actually also delete all of this. And let's make this a new answer button. And this is of course going to be our false button. So let's type false. Let's save this. Let's refresh our application. Let's take a look at the emulator. And now we see that it still works. So that's awesome. We now have one widget to display both the true button and the false button. So there are still a few things wrong with our buttons, or at least there is still one thing wrong with our button. Whenever we press on the false button, our print statement prints out "you answered true." Now this is wrong, of course, so let's go to our answer button file. And what we could do is we could use this, this ternary operator, as we did here, for our print statements. But we're not going to do that because we are going to use something way fancier. We are going to use a void callback. And let's call this onTap. Now what exactly is a void callback, I hear you saying? Now a void callback is a type def, and a type def is a signature for a function. So what is a signature for a function, right? So a signature for a function could be something like the return type, so for example int for integer, and then the name, so ontap, for example, ontap, and the arguments, right? So if I make an argument here, bool answer, then this would be a valid signature, right? for a function. So the signature tells us that we want to return an integer, we want to call the function onTap, and we want the function to have an argument, which is a boolean called answer. Now, the void callback is such a signature, but the signature tells us that we do not return anything. So void, we tell it that the function name is onTap, so onTap. And a void callback does not have any arguments, so we leave this empty. And that's basically what a void callback is. So if that doesn't make sense to you right now, don't worry too much about it, because we are going to implement it in a second. But for now, let's just also pass this in our arguments. And in the onTap property, let's remove this print statement, and let's replace it with the onTap callback function. Let's save this. Let's go back to our quiz page, because now we are not having enough arguments in our answer button constructor, or whenever we create our answer button. So what we could do now is we could create a function in here that looks like this, which returns nothing, right? So now we could do print you answered true, and we could do we could also create a function here, print you answered false. Did I do anything wrong here? I sure did. Let's take a look. Let's just copy this. All right, so let's save this. Let's refresh our application. And let's take a look. So this should print out you entered true, which is correct. And this false button should now print out you entered false, which is correct. Awesome. Now let's clean this up a little bit. So instead of using this normal syntax for a function, let's use an arrow function to make it a little bit cleaner. And let's do the same for our other button, right? Save this, refresh this, and we should see the same results. So let's now finish up our answer button class. So let's go back to our answer button file. In here, we see an arrow, or at least a warning, saying that the stateless widget is immutable. So our class variables should never change. So we should place final in front of them. Final. And I already made this onTap function private. So let's do the same for answer, because we don't want the user to change anything to the button once it's created, right? All right, save this, refresh this, and this should give us the exact same results. It did not. Oh, we forgot to replace this answer with underscore answer. Save, refresh, and that should give us the same results. So let's now actually apply some styling to our buttons, right? Because in the preview application, they looked way nicer. So let's go back to our answer button. And first of all, the text should look better. So let's expose that style property. Let's do it on a new line. So style, which takes a new text style. And in here, let's make the color of the text white. The font size is going to be 40.0. The font weight is going to be bold. And the font style is going to be italic. Save this, refresh, and that should look nicer already. Awesome. Now the preview application also had some nice borders around the text, and that's why we have this container here, because container has a property called decoration, and this takes a new box decoration, which has a property called border. And in here we can add a new border .all, because we want the border to be around all sides. And we can say, okay, we want the border to be white. Oops, colors.white. And we want the border to have a width of 5.0. Save this, refresh this. That should look better already. Now, if you're also triggered by the box or the border actually touching the text, and that's because there's not enough padding between the text and the box. So let's add some padding. The container also has a property called padding, which takes a edge insets, and we're going to use edge insets all. And in here we can apply the padding. So a padding of 20.0, for example. Save this, refresh, and that should add some padding to the border and the text. So let's now make the visuals for our text that will be displaying the question or the statement, whatever we want to call it. So let's go back to quizpage.dart, and in between these two questions, let's create a new material. This material is going to have a color, and let's make it white. Whoops. Color is .white. Now the material has a child property, and let's pass a new center in here because we want the text to be centered, of course. And the center has a child, and this child is going to be the text, right? So normally we would pass the question in here or the statement, but we don't have questions yet, so let's just create some placeholder. So statements 1, pizza is nice. Let's save this and let's refresh our application. And this looks good already, right? But we do not have enough padding, in my opinion, between the buttons and the actual text. So let's get some padding in here. So with a container, like in our answer button, the container has a property called padding. But what we actually also can do is use a padding widget. So let's copy this, so the center and the text, and the material will have a child called no padding instead, and the padding is going to hold our center and our text, right? Oops. If this wants to work, of course. All right. Now the padding widget has a property called padding, of course, and in here we can do the same as we did with the container padding, right? We can pass it an edge insets. So let's do that. So padding, new edge insets, and instead of using edge insets all, we only want some padding on the vertical axis. So we are going to use edge insets symmetric. And we're going to say, okay, vertical, we want a padding of something like 20.0. Let's save this, reload this, and now we should have a nice container with our text in. So let's now actually make a separate file for this container holding our text, because we're also going to add some animation to it. So it makes sense to actually create a new separate class for it, a new separate widget, so our code looks a little bit cleaner. So in the UI folder, let's create a new file. Let's call this question_text.dart. And in here, let's import our material package. And let's create a new class. Let's call this question text, which will be extending a stateful widget. Why we're using a stateful widget will become clear in a second. But let's just write down the boilerplate for stateful widgets. So let's also write a state question text. Let's override the create state method. So state create state new question state, question text state, and in here in our state, let's actually override our build methods, build context. Awesome. Now we can return all of our visuals in our build method as usual. As usual. So let's go ahead and copy all of this. Let's copy this and let's return it in here. Right. So let's try to indent this. Nice. One more time. Whoops. Let's save this. Let's import it in here. So import UI, and we want to import the question text.dart file. And now in here, we can simply create a new question text. Let's save this, and this should return the exact same as before. And it does, so awesome. So let's now make our question text a little bit more modular, because right now we're stuck with this one string kind of to display. So we should have an argument for this, for the statement number or the question number, and we should have an argument for the actual statement or question, right? So let's go into our question underscore text.dart file, and let's, in our stateful widgets, in our question text class, create some class variables. Let's make them final, because remember, stateful widgets class is immutable. And let's make the first variable a string, and let's call this question. And the other class variable is going to be an integer, and let's call this question number. Let's save this. And now we should first of all, we should actually make a constructor here, question text, this dot question, and this dot question number. And now I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking like, how do we get these variables into our actual class, so into here, where we are actually building the layout, right? So how do we do that? So let's look at an example for the text. Let's try to replace this one with the question number defined in our question text. Okay, so in here, let's append a string, or let's try to append this question number. And we do that by using widgets dot, and then we have access to the variables of our stateful widgets of our question text, right? So now we can do widget of question text dot to string, and now that should work. Now let's also replace this pizza is nice with the question from our stateful widgets. So let's do widgets dot question. Let's save this. Now, of course, in here we should add these arguments. So the question will still be pizza is nice, and let's make it the first statement, right? Let's save this, refresh this. We should actually fully reload this, so with uppercase R, because we changed the state. We want to rebuild our question text, right? So we should use uppercase R, and now we should still see the same visuals as before, right? All right, so let's now actually start doing something very exciting. Let's create our first animation for our text here. So the animation that we're going after is an animation that pops the text up. So for example, the font size starts at 0 and goes up and up and up till something like 20, right? So we increase the font size over time. First of all, let's try to fix this spacing issue. So let's go to our question text.dart file, and let's add a space here. Let's save this, refresh this, and that should fix it. Awesome. Let's now start creating the animation. So first of all, we have to add something to our class, to our question text state. So type with single ticker provider state mixin. And that's a really scary looking word. I know it is, but just don't worry too much about it right now. We'll come back to it in a second. But just know that when you're using an animation, you need a ticker provider state mixin. All right, so we will need a few class variables. One is going to be an animation, and let's call this animation font size animation. And we also need an animation controller, and let's call this font size animation controller. So let's think about what these two variables will do for us. So first of all, an animation will have a value, and its value will be a double. And this animation value will be 0, 0.1, 0.2, and so on and so on and so on until 1, right? So that's why we're using double here. And the animation controller is actually what is going to control our font size animation. So where should we actually assign objects to these variables. So we should do that in the init state method. So let's override this, just like we did before. Do not forget to call the super.initState function method. And now we can assign something to our font size animation controller. So let's do that. Font size animation controller equals new animation controller. Now animation controller has a property called duration, in which we set the duration of the animation. So new duration. And now we can choose between days, hours, microseconds, milliseconds. Of course, we're going to use milliseconds because we want the animation to be fast, of course. So let's say something like 500 milliseconds. And something else that we need to pass into this animation controller is vsync. Vsync takes a ticker provider, and it's not a coincidence that vsync takes a ticker provider, and we typed single ticker provider state mix in here. Because for vsync, we just pass in this object, this class. So let's think about what vsync is first, and then go back to the single ticker provider state mixin. So vsync is vsync handles animations that go outside the screen for us. So for example, if I have an animation that goes outside the screen, it would be a waste to actually render out that animation, to actually calculate anything for that animation, because we're not seeing it. So vsync handles that for us. Now single ticker provider state mixin, and I'm just going to read this from the docs. So provides a single ticker that is configured to only tick while the current 3 is enabled, as defined by ticker mode. So it just provides us with a ticker, a single ticker, which we can pass into this vsync object. So don't worry too much about this. One thing that you should know is with a single ticker provider state mixin, you can have one animation controller. With a ticker provider state mixin, you can have multiple animation controllers. So just keep that in mind. All right, so let's now actually assign something to our font animation. So the font animation is going to take a new curved animation. This animation has a parent. The parent is going to be the font size controller. And this animation is also going to have a curve. And the curve is going to be linear for now. More about the curves in a second. So like I told you guys, the font size animation, so the animation has a value. The value changes over time, starts from 0, then goes to 0.1, and goes to 0.2, etc., etc. So if we want the text, so our text here, to change font size over time, we first of all need to have a style object here, a text style. So new text style. And in here, we set the font size to font size animation dot value. So first of all, so at the beginning, this font size will be 0, and at the end, the font size will be 1. But font size of 1 is rather small. So for example, if we would like the font size to be, let's say 15, then we should multiply this by 15, right? Because at the end, we will do 15 multiplied by 1, which is going to give us a font size of 15, of course. Awesome. Now, one more thing that we should do, or two more things that we should do for this animation to work, is we should set the state somewhere, right? Because we're rebuilding our text because the font size changes. So to do that, we are going to add a listener to our font size animation. So font size animation.add listener. And in here, we are going to set the state. So this.sets state. And this is going to be an empty set state. So once again, why we need this is because our font size animation value is used for the font size of our text. We display the text, and therefore every time the font size, every time the value of the animation changes, we want to re-render that text, rebuild that text, right? So that's why we need this empty set state. Now to actually start our animation, we need to forward it, and we do that by using the font size animation controller dot forward. All right, let's save this. Let's reload our application. We should fully reload our application. So uppercase R, because we are rebuilding this. We have changed the state, right? So let's fully restart this, and hopefully this works. And it does, so awesome. You now built your first animation. So one more thing that we can change about this animation is the curve. So let's take a look what the curve actually is. Right now we got a linear curve, which means that the value of our animation value will, over time, will look like this. So we start at 0 and we go up until 1.0 linearly. Now we could actually also use something else like bounce out. If we save this and reload this, then we will have an animation that kind of bounces out. And let's take a look at what that looks like. Looks awesome. Now with curves you have to watch out, of course, because for example, if I use elastic in and take a look at the curve, then I see that at some point the curve, the value of the animation goes below 0. And for us, we use the animation value for the font size. And of course, a negative font size is not defined. So we can therefore not use the elastic in curve. So let's just keep this to bounce out for us. Save this, reload this, and now we have this awesome animation ready to go. All right, so our quiz page is almost finished, but there is one more thing that we should do, one more thing that we should create, and that is the overlay. So remember in the preview application, whenever the user entered a question or a statement, an overlay, we popped an overlay over the screen, showing the user whether the answer was correct or wrong. So let's create that right now. So in our UI folder, let's create a new file, and let's call this corrects underscore wrong underscore overlay .dart. And I know I'm not very original with my names, but that's fine, I guess. And in here, let's import the material.dart file package. Let's create a new class, and let's call this correct wrong overlay. And this will be extending the state full widget, because we are going to have an animation in here. So let's also create the states for our correct wrong overlay. And this will be extending state, of course. And we've been doing this forever now, so you should be getting used to writing this out, right? So right now in here, let's override the create state methods. Create state, new correct wrong state, and in here we should override the build method, right? So override widgets build context. So let's think about what the layout actually looks like for the overlay. So let's now start making the layout for this overlay. So let's return a new material in our build methods. And this material will have a color. And remember from the preview application, we had a like transparent black color. So to get that transparent black color, we say colors.black. Instead of using black, we use black 54, which is black with a 54% opacity. So that's exactly what we need. So the child will be one of those magical inkwell buttons. So inkwell. And the onTap property, let's just make this something like print you tapped the overlay. This inkwell will have a child, and this child is going to be a new column. And in here we will have some children. One of them is going to be a container, which will hold the icon that we use to show the user whether the answer was correct or wrong. And we will also need a text, right, to say whether the answer was wrong or correct. So let's now just say correct. Okay, so in this container, let's now create our icon. So to do that, we just say child new icon. And I don't think we have used the icon widget before, but it's fairly easy. So you just say new icon, and then in here as the argument, you pass in an icon. So there is a lot of pre-built icons from the Google Material library. So to access those, we just type icons dots, and we're going to use icons dots, what's it called? Done. All right, so let's save this, and let's now go to our quiz page, and let's import our overlay. So import UI, and let's say correct wrong overlay.dart. And now in our stack, remember the stack is used to stack widgets on top of each other, display widgets on top of each other. So in our stack, in the children of our stack, let's add a new correct wrong overlay. Let's save this. Let's restart our application. And let's take a look. That doesn't really look right. Okay, so the reason for that is the stack has a property called fit, which takes a stack fit, and the stack fit is going to be either expand, loose, or pass through. We want to the widgets to expand as much as possible, so therefore the fit is going to be stack fit.expand. Save this, fully restart this, and now it should fill the complete screen, right? Hopefully. And now you can see this text here, and at the top you can see the icon. All right, so let's now create some sort of style for this overlay, right? Because it looks a little bit boring. The content is not centered and that kind of stuff. So let's go back to our correct wrong overlay file. And first of all, let's try to center our content. So in the column, remember, column has a property called main axis alignment. And let's set that to center. So main axis alignment dot center. Save this, hot reload this, and that should fix that. Awesome. Now let's make the icon a little bit bigger. So icon also has a property called size. And in here, let's make the size 80.0. Let's also add some style to the text. So style, new text style. And the text style, let's say color is the white. And let's make this, the font size, let's make that something like 30.0. Save this, hot reload, and now it should look a little bit better. Now, one more thing that I did in the preview application is I had this white circular border around the icon. So that's why we actually have a container here. Because remember, the container has a decoration property, which we can pass a new box decoration to. And box decoration has a property called color. So let's say colors.white. Save this, refresh, and now we already got something. But now we want to create a circular container, right, instead of a rectangular. So to do that, we can use the shape property in the decoration, and we can say box shape dot circle. Save this, hot reload, and now we have a circular button, circular icon at least. So let's now make our correct wrong overlay a little bit more modular, because the user is at the moment stuck seeing the correct text and the done icon. But of course, if the user, his answer is wrong, then we would like to display something else. So first of all, let's fix this typo here. And let's now go into our correct wrong overlay. Let's create a new variable, which is going to be a boolean called isCorrect. And let's pass that in the constructor. So correct wrong overlay, this dot isCorrect. And now with this boolean, with this variable, we can decide whether the answer, whether the icon and the text should be correct or wrong, right? So in here, let's type widget dot isCorrect. So if it's correct, then we want to display the text saying correct. Else we want to display some text saying that the answer was wrong. So something like wrong. Okay, let's save this. Let's do the same for our icon. So widget dot isCorrect. If that's true, then we are going to display icons dots, oops, icons dots done. Whoops, that wants to work, icons dot done. Else we are going to display icons dot clear. All right, let's save this. And let's now go to our quiz page because we changed the constructor here. So we also need to do that here. And let's say that I want an overlay for an answer that was wrong, that was false. So let's type in false here. Let's reload this. And now we should see the correct icon and text, of course. Let's try this for true. Save this, reload this, and that should still be correct. Now I also feel that there is not enough space between this button and this text, so let's go back to our correct wrong overlay, and in our column, in the children of our column, between the container that holds our icon, so this, and between our text, let's add a new padding, so new padding. And new padding, of course, has a property called padding, which takes an edge insets all, and we're now going to use an edge insets only. Now we can choose between top, bottom, left, right. We're going to say top, or actually we're going to say bottom, and let's have some padding of 20.0. Let's add a comma here, save this, reload, and now we should have some more space. So let's now create the animation for our icon. So if you remember from the preview application, the icon kind of rotates in, growing bigger over time. So let's now try to recreate that. So let's go back to our correct wrong overlay and let's type width single thicker provided with state mixin. In here we need an animation controller and an animation, of course. So animation double, and let's call this animation icon animation, something similar, of course. And we also need an animation controller. Let's call this icon animation controller. After that, we should override the init state methods. Override void init state. Don't forget to call super.init states. And in here, we should assign the icon animation controller to a new animation controller. The duration will be a new duration, and let's say that we want the animation to be 2 seconds, so 2. And vsync, of course, is just going to be this. Let's now also assign something to our icon animation. So icon animation equals new animation, or equals new curved animation, I'm sorry. The parent of this curved animation is going to be our icon animation controller. And for the curve, we are going to use a curve called elastic out. Now remember, we also need to add a listener to set the state whenever the icon, whenever the animation's value changes. So let's do that. Icon animation dot add listener. And in here we do this dot set state. And we also need to start the animation, right? So we do something like icon animation controller dot forward. All right, so now we have our animation ready. We just need to use the animation, the icon animation value somewhere. So to actually do that, let's copy this. Let's cut this for now. And instead of an icon being the child of the container, we are going to create a new transform dot rotate. This also takes a child, and that child is going to be our icon. But it also has a property called angle. And this angle we are going to set to the icon animation value dot value. So remember, the animation value goes from 0 to 0.1 to 1, of course, right? So we want to rotate 1 full rotation, so 360 degrees. So we should do this times 2 times pi, right? Because pi is 180 degrees and 2 times pi would be 360 degrees and that would be a full rotation. Now pi is in the mat library, so we need to import that. So in here, let's import mat, so dart mat. Save this, and I think we should be fine now. Let's fully restart our application, and let's take a look. So that looks really good in my opinion, but of course in the preview application we also made the icon grow bigger over time. So let's do that really quick. So in here, the icon, we have set the size to 80. So let's actually do icon animation dot value times 80. Let's save this, fully restart this, and now we should see a cool animation with the icon growing bigger. Alright, so almost all of our visuals are finished. We only need to create one more page, which is going to be the score page for to display at the end of the quiz. But for now, let's go back to our quiz_page.dart file. And in here, we still need to do a lot of things, right? Because we still need to create a quiz, we still need to keep track of the current question and all of that kind of stuff. So first of all, let's create a question variable, which I'm going to call question. And this is basically going to be, or actually let's call this current question. And this is just going to hold our current question. We also need a quiz. Let's call this quiz. And let's create a new quiz here. Remember, a quiz takes a list of questions. So let's create a list of questions. So new question. The question here is going to be Elon Musk is human. And I actually know that these are statements and not questions, but in my mind it just makes sense to call them questions. So I'm sorry if you are like triggered about that, but that's just what's going on in my head. So the answer for this question or statement is going to be false, of course. Then another question could be something like question, pizza is healthy? That's false, of course. And let's now make a true question, new question. Flutter is awesome. And of course that is true. Let's save this, and now we created a quiz. Some more thing that we need here is a string to hold the question text. We also need an integer for the question number, the current question. We need and we also need a boolean to keep track whether the current answer is correct or wrong, right? All right, so now let's override the init state method. So void init state in here, call super.initState. And here we are going to assign values to these variables, of course. So first of all, the current question. Current question, if that wants to load, is going to be our quiz dot next question. Our question text is going to be our current question dot question, and our question text is going to be let's think about this, current question number. So question number is going to be current question dot, and how did we call this, or actually quiz dot question number. So let's now actually use our variables that we just created in our layout. So for example, in our question text, we can now change this hard-coded string with our question text. And this number, so the question number can be the question number. Now, you might have noticed that we still have our overlay on top of our page, which should not be there, of course, because at the beginning we want the user to be able to answer. So to actually create some sort of toggle to switch the overlay on and off, we create a new variable. And I'm going to call this overlay should be visible. And let's initially set that to false, right? And then in here, in our stack, in the children of our stack, we have our correct wrong overlay. So we're going to use a ternary operator here. So if overlay should be visible equals true, then we want to display our correct wrong overlay, right? Else we would like to, oops, this should be a question mark, of course. Else we would like to hide it. So to hide it, we just give it an empty container, right? Because an empty container does not display anything. All right, so let's save this. Let's restart our application, and now the overlay should be hidden. Awesome. All right, so what I would now like to do is get some functions to handle the answers of the user. So whenever the user taps through, I want the overlay to pop up and check whether the answer was actually correct or false. So let's do that right now. In our quiz page state, let's create a new function, and let's call this handle answer. And this will take a boolean, which is going to be the answer of the user. So in here, remember, is correct, this variable will hold whether the current user's answer is correct or false. So we set is correct equal to, well, if the current question dot answer equals answer. So if these two are equal to each other, the user's question is equal to the user's answer is equal to the current question's answer, then is correct is going to be true, else it's going to be false. Something else that we should do is call quiz.answer, and in here we pass whether the user, his answer was correct or wrong. So we pass in is correct, and remember this answer function basically just adds the score by 1 if the answer is correct. Something else that we should do here is call this.setState. So the reason why we are calling this.setState here is because we want to display the overlay. We want to change something about the visuals by changing the state. And the state that we're actually changing is the overlay should be visible, right? Okay, so one more time, the reason that we call this.setState is because we are changing state, and changing this state will result in rebuilding the widget to show a new visual. And in our case, that's to show the overlay. All right, so now we should call handle answer somewhere. So whenever we press on the true button, so this is the true button, we want to call the handle answer method, so handle answer with an argument of true, right? Because we answered true. This is going to be the false button, so false button. And whenever we press this button, we would like to handle the answer with an answer of false. Awesome. Now, one more thing that we should do is remember the correct wrong overlay takes an argument whether the answer of the user is correct or wrong. So here in the correct wrong overlay, we should also pass is correct. Let's save this. Let's fully restart this. And now we are seeing our application, we are seeing the statement, and now I can answer either true or false. Now remember, Elon Musk is not a human, so let's answer false. And now we should see an overlay saying that the answer that we've given is correct. Let's now restart this again, and let's give a wrong answer to our quiz to test whether the overlay is actually working. Flutter is awesome. Well, it is, but let's say false for now. And we get the overlay saying that our answer was wrong. So as you might have noticed, we still have a problem here because whenever the overlay is displayed, there is no way for the user to dismiss it. So we still have that like cool inkwell magical button, but the only thing that it actually does is print something out in the console, in the terminal. So that's not really useful. So let's try to fix that. Let's go to our correct wrong overlay file. And in our correct wrong overlay, let's create a new variable, which is going to be a void callback. And let's call this onTap. Now remember, a void callback is a signature of a function with a return type of void, so it doesn't return anything and it doesn't take any arguments. So it's going to look like this. So void onTap. So this is what this is going to look like, right? All right, so let's add this in the constructor. So this dot onTap. This dot onTap. And let's now go to our correct wrong overlay state. And in our inkwell, whenever someone taps the inkwell, we want to call our onTap void callback function, right? So widgets dot onTap, right? So once again, one more time, this is going to allow us to add a function to add a function in our correct wrong overlay, which is going to be executed every time someone taps on our inkwell. So every time someone taps on our overlay. So let's go back to our quiz page and let's go to our correct wrong overlay. We can now see that we haven't, that something is wrong here because we do not have enough arguments. So let's open this up. So the first argument will still be is correct, but the second argument is actually going to be a function now, right? So in here, we create a new function. And this function, first of all, is going to set a new, is going to update the current question. So current question equals quiz dot next question. Something else that we're going to do is do this dot set state. And we're calling set state because we want the overlay to change. So overlay should be visible, should now be equal to false. So we are dismissing the overlay in a way. The question text visual will also change, right? So the question text should now be current question dot question. And the question number visual should also change. So the question number is now going to be equal to quiz.question number. Right? Let's save this. Let's fully reload our application and let's take a look. All right, and something is wrong, of course. We forgot to add the semicolon at the end of this.setState function. So let's save that and let's reload again. And once again, I did something wrong, of course, because this current question should be equal to quiz.nextQuestion. This is a getter, so we do not have to make this a function call. Let's save this and let's restart this one last time to check whether our code is correct. All right, so now we can enter our statement. So Pita is healthy. Well, it kind of isn't, so let's say false. This should bring up the overlay saying that the answer is correct. And then whenever I tap this overlay, then the overlay should dismiss, the question text should change, and the question number should also change, right? So let's do that. Let's try that. And that works. Now this the animation for the question text doesn't work anymore, and there's a good reason for that. So let's try to figure that out right now. So to actually understand why our text is not animating anymore after we tapped on after we dismissed the overlay, we should go back to our question_text.dart file and let's take a look. So here in our init state, in here, we start the animation, so we forward the animation once. But we want to update the animation every single time that we change the text. So every single time that this text changes, right? So to do that, we are going to override another method. So void did update widget, and this is going to take a question text, old widgets. So what did update widget do? So I'm sorry. So what this is going to do for us is every time that the widget updates, we are going to be able to compare the new widgets, the new question text with the old widgets, right? So let's try to do this. First of all, we should call super.did update widgets, old widgets, and in here we can do if old widgets dot question. If that's not equal to widgets dot question, then we want to reset our animation, right? We want to restart it. So we do font size animation controller dot reset, and after that we do font size animation controller dot forwards, right? So let's take a look at that one more time. So did update widget will get called whenever the widget updates, and it will also give us the old widget, and this old widget will make it possible for us to compare the old widget with the new widget. So it makes it possible for us to check whether the question in the old widget is not equal to the question in the new widget anymore. So whenever these are not equal anymore, we want to reset the animation and restart our animation, right? So let's save this. Let's fully restart our application. And statement 1, Elon Musk is human. Well, that's not true, so false. So we get the overlay, and whenever I dismiss it now, we should see our text animation popping up again. And that works. Awesome. All right, so once that is done, the quiz page is kind of done. There's still a little bit of things to do, some things to do, but let's just consider it done for now. So let's now actually try to get some sort of navigation between our homepage, our landing page, and our quiz page, right? Because right now in main.dart, we are displaying our quiz page, but of course that is not our home, right? So let's, for now, delete this, and let's display our landing page to be our homepage, right? Save this, restart our application, and now we should see our landing page again. All right, so we are now going to connect the two pages to navigate between them. So let's go to our landing_page.dart file, and let's first of all import the page that we want to navigate to, which is going to be our quiz page. And now remember that we have an inkwell. So whenever we tap this page, we print something out to the terminal, which is not very useful. So instead of printing something out to the terminal, we would like to navigate. So to actually do navigation, we type navigator.off context dot push, because we want to push a new route. We want to push a new page. This takes a new material page route, and a material page route has an argument, has a property called builder, and in here we type build context, and here we return the page that we actually want to navigate to. So that's going to be our quiz page. Let's save this. Let's restart our application. And now, if everything went right, then whenever I tap this page now, we should navigate to our quiz page. And that works. So let's now start creating our last page, and this last page is going to be a page that displays the score when you are finished with your quiz. So in the pages folder, let's create a new file. Let's call this something like score underscore page.dart. And in here, we are going to import the material package. And this is going to be a static page. So we are going to make this a stateless widget called score page. So it will be extending stateless widget. And in here, as usual, we should override the build methods, build context. And now we can start building the layout. Now, if you want to do this little page on your own, feel free to do so. It's a very simple page, and it's just going to display the score of the user from the quiz, right? So if you want to challenge yourself, feel free to do this yourself and come back to the video after that. All right. So to actually build this page, let's return a new material. This material is going to have a color. Whoops. Color. Let's make this blue, a blue accent color. It's going to have a child, which is going to be a column. This column is, of course, going to have some children. We want to display the children in the center of the column. So in the center of the main axis, so main axis alignments will be main axis alignment dot center. And in here, we will have a text, so a new text, displaying something like your score. Then we will have another text, something like new text, with the score, so something like 2 out of 5. And then we will have an icon button, so a new icon button. This is the first time that we use this widget. An icon button is basically the same as an icon, but it adds the functionality of a button to it. So an icon button has a property called icon. In here, we can create a new icon widget. And this icon widget is just going to show an icon with an arrow to the right. If I can find it, arrow right. And whenever we, also we want to give it a color. So colors, want to give the button a color, so colors.white. We want to give this an icon size of 50.0. And whenever we press this button, so when unpressed, for now we're just going to print cool. Awesome. So let's now go to main.dart and let's import this page. So import pages, and this is called the score page. Let's now display it as our home page. So new score page, save it and restart our application. So let's now style our page a little bit better because it doesn't look that good in my opinion. So let's go back to our score page. First of all, the text should have a style. So style, new text style. The color should be white in my opinion. Colors.white, and the font weight should be bold. Font weight.bold, and the font size is going to be equal to 50.0. And let's actually apply the same style to our other text. Save this, restart it. All right, so let's now actually try to get rid of this hard-coded score. So to do that, let's create some new variables. Let's say final int score, and we also need an integer to keep track of how many questions there actually were. So total questions. And now we can create a constructor here. So score page, this dot score, and this dot total questions. Total questions, rather. And let's now change this. So in here, let's do score.toString plus total questions.toString. Save this. And of course, now in main.dart, we are going to have something that isn't correct because now we need 2 arguments in our score page. So let's do that. Let's say that I have a score of 5 out of 10. Save this, fully restart this, and that should work. All right, so let's now actually try to create some sort of navigation between the quiz page and the score page. So to do that, let's go to our quiz page and the Dart file. Let's import this score page here. So import, score, let's import score page. And now remember, whenever we tap on the overlay, whenever we tap on the correct wrong overlay, then this function is called. So at the beginning of this function, if the quiz.length equals to our question number, so this actually means if there is no questions left, then we should navigate to our other page, right? So then we're going to do navigator dot off context dot push, and we are going to push a new material route page, or page route rather. The builder is going to look like this. Whoops. Build context, and in here we return, or we say new score page. And in here we can pass in the score, and the score was stored in quiz.score, and total questions was stored in quiz.length, right? So something else that we should do is return, because we do not want any of this to be executed after we navigated to our page. Let's save this and let's restart. Let's actually first go to our main.dart file, and in here let's make our quiz page our home page. So new quiz page, save this, and now restart. All right, so that actually crashed the application for me, and the reason for that is that the animations are not disposed, or the animation controllers are not disposed. So what that actually means is, let me show you guys. So in question text, for example, we have an animation controller, and whenever we dispose our widget, we should also dispose our animation controller. So we should override a method here, void dispose, and here we call font size animation controller dot dispose. Then we call super dot dispose. And it's actually very important to do every single time whenever you have an animation controller, and this will free the resources from that animation controller to your device again. So never forget this. Now we also forgot to do this in the correct wrong overlay. So we should also have an override here, void dispose, and in here let's do icon animation controller dot dispose, and then do super dot dispose. Now save this. Let's go back to our main.dart file. Let's fully reload this application, and now we should be good to go. Okay, so let's take a look whether everything works. So Pizza is healthy, true. Whoops, that's false, so that's wrong. Flutter is awesome, that's true for sure. And Elon Musk is human, that's false for sure. And now we should be navigated to our score page with the correct score, which is correct. But one thing that is not correct is that we can still navigate back, right? So that should not be possible. So to fix this, we are going to go back to our quiz page. And here we want to push and remove all of the previous locations that we've been to. So let's do that really quick. So push and remove until. Let's remove this. And we want to remove all of the previous routes that we've been to. So routes. We want to remove everything until the route equals null, right? So what we did here is this first argument is still the same, the material page route, and the second argument is now telling us, okay, we want to remove all of the previous pages, all of the previous routes until the route is null, so until there is no route left. Let's save this. All right, so let's now test this again. So Elon Musk is human, false. Pizza is healthy, false. And Flutter is awesome, that's true. Let's now, now we're going to the score page, and whenever I tap the back icon, the app would actually close. Okay, so I went ahead and restarted my application, and now the final thing that is left to do for us to finish this application is create some sort of navigation between the score page and the landing page, right? Because every time that we are on the score page, we want to be able to go back to the landing page. So to do that, let's go to our score page file, and here we have this icon button, and whenever we press on this icon, we would want to go back to the landing page. So first of all, let's import the landing page. Import. And we want to import landing underscore page dot dart. And in here, let's do navigator dot off. So just like we did before, context dot push and remove until, because we don't want the user to be able to go back to the quiz that he actually finished, right? So push and remove until. So first of all, the first argument is going to be a new material page route with a builder. Let's fill this in real quick. Build context, and let's return a new landing page here. And the predicate is going to be just go back until there is no roots left. So root until root equals null, right? So this is saying remove all the roots until there's no root left, right? Let's save this. Let's now go to main.dart and let's switch quiz page with landing page. And now we should be able to have to go through the full process of our application, right? So if I now restart this application, now I should be able to just start the quiz. Flutter is awesome, true. Let's make some mistake here. Elon Musk is human, true. That's false actually, but okay. Pizza is healthy, false. Now we see the score is 2 out of 3. And when we press this button here, then we go back to the landing page. So let's try this again. Pizza is healthy, is that true? It's false. Elon Musk is human, false. And Flutter is awesome, that's true. And let's now actually try to go back to the quiz page. But remember, we pushed and removed until there is no page or no route left. So that should actually close our application. And that did exactly what we expected it to do. Awesome, so our application is now finished. Alright, so that was the complete crash course for Flutter. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was a real long video. I know it took a real long time to make, so I would appreciate it if you would drop a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. If not, of course, feel free to put some constructive criticism down in the comments below. Also, if you did not understand a specific concept of Flutter, such as navigation, animation, I got a lot of other great tutorials on my YouTube channel that you can watch to like maybe get a deeper understanding of the concepts. So that was it. Really hope you guys enjoyed it. Really hope you guys learned something, and I'll see you guys in the next one.